Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic. This week we're continuing with our post-election state-by-state breakdown, and this week we're doing Western Australia, the Northern Territory and the ACT. So we'll be checking with Priya Brown from WA, Ryan Neve from the Northern Territory, plus we've got a fresh voice on the pod, Louise Crossman. Louise is a political strategist with over 2 decades of campaign experience and the former president of ACT Labor, and she'll speak with us today on the show about the federal election results coming out of the Australian Capital Territory, which is great because unlike Jessie, who did the preview, she actually lives there. We'll save Jessie for Victoria, which brings me to my next point. Our live show in Melbourne is fast approaching, and at the time of recording, there's only about 30 tickets left. So act fast to secure your seat at the live show. It's on Thursday, May the 29th at 7 p.m, and we will start right on 7 p.m. At the Toff in Curtin House on Swanston Street in the CBD. So it's a perfect place for knock-off drinks, as well as a wonderful occasion to celebrate Labor's historic landslide election victory. I'll be joined by Jessie, of course, also my regular co-host David Feeney, as well as digital campaign strategist Reid Fleming and Victorian State correspondent for The Guardian, Benita Kolovos. Tickets are linked in the show notes. And finally, if you are a Patreon member at the campaign organiser or team leader level, you and a plus one can come to the show for free. But you just need to make sure you message either myself or Grace on Patreon so we can ensure that you've got a ticket for the event. And we look forward to seeing everyone there on Thursday the 29th for what should be a really, really enjoyable evening amongst comrades. All right, let's get to it after a word from our sponsors. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn has been fighting for workers' rights in Australia for more than 100 years. They believe the law should serve everyone and not just those that can afford it. So for empathetic and expert legal support, call Maurice Blackburn Lawyers today. All right, let's get on with today's episode. Let's head to the first of our territories, the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory. Didn't even know this existed, to be honest with you, until the election. As you would note, I got Jessie McCrone to do the preview of the ACT, and then it was brought to my attention by a good comrade that the ACT actually is an independent government and that they have their own jurisdiction. Who knew that? I thought they were a shelf company of the New South Wales Right. But we're now joined on the line by a former ACT party president, democratically elected. They have their own branch. She's a long-time campaigner for the party, but she's now the director at Crossman Consulting, a Canberra-based gov relations consultancy firm in the ACT. Louise Crossman, welcome to Socially Democratic.
Thank you so much for having me after I've pestered you to let me be on the show.
I'm incredibly grateful for you for doing that. And it's good I can't keep on getting Michael Cooney on the show to talk about Canberra, for God's sake. It's good to actually have someone who lives in Canberra now to talk about Canberra.
Yes, exactly.
So let's dive straight into it and cover off the overall territory. I want to call it state totals, territory totals. Labor on our primary had a 2.6% swing to us this is the lower house race, 47.5% primary for Labor, just under a 5.5 point swing against the coalition, taking them down to 21. Others, and we'll get to this, had an 11.2% swing to them on their primary, taking the sort of others up to 16.3, 3.5, or more than 3 actually, 3.7% swing against the Greens, taking their primary down to 15%. And then the sort of, all of the cookers after that. There was a 4.6% swing to Labor on our two-party preferred, taking our two-party preferred total up to 71.5%. Just sounds weird saying that. You just feel like you want to get the UN to go in and check the ballots to make sure it wasn't done inappropriately or something, that people weren't being forced to vote for the Labor Party. And the coalition on 28.5. Great result for the Labor Party in the Australian Capital Territory. We'll dive into sort of the more specifics in a moment, but just want to get your overall thoughts on the result in the ACT, Louise.
Yeah, so perhaps surprisingly, Peter Dutton was promising to sack everybody. So 41,000 public service jobs promised to be cut, and that's not 41,000 public service jobs across the country. That was specifically jobs in Canberra. The funniest thing about that, probably from a campaign perspective, Stephen, that you'll appreciate from your time in head office, is we'd had all these corflutes printed saying Peter Dutton will cut 36,000 public service jobs. So he had to print off some stickers to change that 36,000 to 41,000. So we made a really strong case against why Peter Dutton would be bad for Canberra, and that was certainly reflected in the Liberal result, not just House of Reps but also in the Senate, but then varying degrees of making the positive case for Labor in those House of Reps seats.
Let's do those House of Reps seats to begin with. Obviously, good result for us in Canberra and Fenner, where we saw 7-6% swings to us on our two-party preferred. But obviously, Bean was the one that kind of, well, for those of us outside of the ACT, none of us were thinking about any of the seats in the ACT when we didn't even preview Bean. Yeah, that's on us, right? But obviously throughout the night and then the days after, we were like, oh, shit, we might lose Bean. So what happened?
So the result in Bean is perhaps less surprising to the electors who live in the electorate of Bean than the rest of the country. One thing that had been pointed out was, how did the press gallery miss this when it's in Canberra where a lot of them live? But the Bean electorate is the southernmost part of the ACT. It's Tuggeranong, Woden, Western Creek, for anyone that's spent any time here in Canberra. And a lot of the press gallery doesn't actually live in that part of Canberra. They live sort of more centrally, closer to Parliament House, in the seat of Canberra itself. So Bean probably flew under the radar of the national political press gallery. But for those of us that are here, it was not a surprise to see Jessie Price come so close. She ran a really strong campaign. I first saw the Voices for Bean crew out at the shops in, I think I worked out, January 2024. I understand that they'd been emailing Voice referendum volunteers, like the Yes campaigners, straight after the referendum, so October 2023. So this was an 18-month campaign that they'd been building, and that's reflected in the strong result for Jessie Price at the election this year.
Did Jessie Price, so she was actually backed by Homes of Court and Climate 200 or whatever they're called?
Yeah, she was backed by Climate 200, and at Simon Holmes of Court's press club address in March this year, he actually called out Jessie, saying that the polling that they'd done was showing really promising results for Jessie's chances in Bean.
So what was the attraction? I mean, looking at the sort of the primary vote there, Labor had a 0.7% swing against us in our primary. So our primary was 41.1. Normally in an election, you go, oh, that's enough,
Yeah, normally that would be enough. And normally you'd think that making the case against a Liberal government would then drive votes to Labor. But actually what's happened is we made a really strong case as to why Peter Dutton would be bad for Bean, but didn't necessarily then make the case perhaps as to why Labor itself was a good option. I was a candidate in the 2024 ACT election, and the 1 in 4 kind of attraction to an independent candidate probably reflects a lot of the conversations that I had last year. People were really hungry for a viable, credible, attractive independent candidate. It wasn't enough to just have independent next to the name. It needed to be somebody who looked like they would do a good job and that they were actually a serious candidate. But there was already a bit of an appetite for an independent candidate in the electorate.
So she's picked up, Jessie Price, I should say, has the independent candidate picked up, obviously she had a swing of 26%. That's her primary because it's the first time she stood. But I guess the story here is that there was a 6.6% swing against the Liberals, bringing their primary down to 23. There was a 5.5% swing against the Greens, and there was a 13%, almost a 14% swing from other candidates that had stood at the last election. Where was Jessie Price collecting her votes from to put her into such a strong position to almost win the seat?
Yeah, she was collecting votes sort of across the non-Labor spectrum. And one of the reasons why she came so close on a two-candidate preferred basis is because everybody preferenced Jessie Price above Labor. So the Liberals How to Vote had, their candidate number one, Jessie Price number two. The Greens had also preferenced Jessie Price above Labor. So then when it came to distribution of preferences, that, a 15 percentage point head start was sort of eaten into in the preference distribution. And the campaign effect was also relatively significant. If you look at where David Smith, because David Lamerton was the Liberal candidate, and we had David Pocock, of course, running in the Senate, so it was a lot of Davids here in Bean. But if you look at where Dave Smith came home probably the strongest, it was in the votes that were coming from outside of the electorate. So absent votes, declaration pre-polls, the postal votes that start coming in from international and outside the electorate, they were the ones that broke much harder for Dave Smith than they did for Jessie Price, and that was what got him over the line in the end. 500-odd votes in it at the moment, and that they would have been the people that weren't as exposed to, a sea of orange claw flutes through the electorate and her volunteers being at the shops quite frequently.
So campaign effect definitely played a role in Price's. I
think it built credibility, right? So it wasn't just about bringing people to her cause. It was more about showing, hey, I'm a credible, viable person who looks like they will do a good job.
What does the future hold for someone like Jessie Price and this kind of teal insurgency inside the boundaries of the ACT going forward?
Well, Jessie Price was on the side of the road just this morning waving signs saying thank you to the electorate. I understand that she's already been attaching herself to a couple of local campaigns run by independent members in the ACT Assembly. So I would fully expect that Jessie Price is going to run again. I'd probably look at, say, Nicolette Buller in Bradfield as an example, where it might be someone who's a stalking horse that's going to spend the next 3 years campaigning and continuing to build a campaign team. Then the other interesting thing is what that also means at a territory level, probably less interesting to you, certainly of interest to Andrew Barr. Andrew Barr was out saying shortly after the federal election that it demonstrates that the independents are the real opposition here in Canberra. So I'd be interested to see what happens at the next federal election, but also the next ACT election, about that non-Labor vote having somewhere to gravitate towards for people that don't like what the Liberals have to offer here, that don't see the Greens as being a constructive force within politics, that there's now this other option that might be appealing to people who then don't want to vote Labor.
Yeah, I mean, he's right there. And I'm always interested in what Andrew Barr has to say. He's a very good friend of the podcast, and I spent 2 days at the cricket watching us beat India. And he was one of the people I remember then saying, no, we can win the federal election. We went through every single seat in the federation, and Andrew came up with a whole scenario by which we did win the election when I was still a bit dubious. So I actually need to name that because Andrew was very, very buoyant when the rest of us probably weren't. It's a genuine concern, right? And maybe it's a good opportunity now to look at the Senate. Do you want to just give us a bit of an overview of the Senate results in the ACT?
Yeah, so in short, David Pocock got 1.2 quotas. Katie Gallagher, I think, got 0.95, or Labor got 0.95 of a quota, so came pretty close. Then the Liberal vote absolutely tanked, so it went from roughly 25, maybe 27%-ish down to below 18%. And the Greens didn't do particularly well either. And again, that's a people rewarding David Pocock for his performance over the past 3 years when he was a key vote for the government. Of course, the interesting thing for the Senate now, Stephen, sorry, I'm probably stealing your thunder here, is that I couldn't mathematically see any scenario where David Pocock's vote now matters, because you're either going to have Labor plus the coalition or Labor plus the Greens, and there's sort of no other pathway to passing legislation in the Senate. So does that give David Pocock more freedom to talk about policy issues that he's interested in? He's not going to be forced necessarily to vote on things because he's not that key swing vote anymore? Or does it mean that he's now no longer relevant and not able to exercise that same leverage? I don't know what that answer is.
It's that's probably a good if we're ever to do a deep dive ACT fuller podcast with categories, unanswerable questions. That's one of them, right? Like you sort of wonder about the life of people like David Pocock in the Senate now with the makeup, because even Jackie Lambie, if she's to get back in again, this hodgepodge of sort of independent aligned senators were incredibly relevant in the last parliament.
And this time round, there is no pathway to 39 votes in the Senate where you're going to put together a hodgepodge of independents. It's either Labor plus the coalition or Labor plus the Greens.
Yeah. Speaking of the Greens, what's been the journey for the Greens in this world where David Pocock has arrived in terms of their Senate vote? Because I would imagine that they probably were eyeing off that spot at some point and thinking that one day maybe we'll get that. And obviously Mr. Pocock's come along and probably stolen half their vote. Would that be – is that a fair
they were eyeing off that spot. They're also keen on having more senators for the ACT, thinking that if the ACT went to, say, 4 senators, that the Greens would get one of those. I don't think that they would on current numbers. But, of course, campaign effect, that might look different if the ACT was electing 4 senators instead of just the 2. Their vote really went down in Canberra, which surprised me because hearing from my friends internally within the Greens, I think they thought that that they'd have a better shot in Canberra, that they thought that they'd had quite a strong candidate who'd done a lot of campaigning and worked really hard. But maybe that suffered a little bit from the overall sort of effect of the Greens. I think that the electorate in Canberra, whose quote was it? Is it John Howard? Looks like Wentworth but votes like Cessnock, something like that.
Yeah, I missed that.
Yeah, there's a quote from like an old-timey Liberal about the way that the ACT votes, but even though we are usually typically a very solid Labor seat, there's this sort of element of sort of personal conservatism, which means that people kind of, they're personally they're not very out there. So that's why you'd see a strong Labor vote, not necessarily splintering to groups like the Greens, and it's why a teal independent really appeals in a way that that the Greens wouldn't. If you compare where the Greens were in 2019, so before the David Pocock effect, with where they are in 2025, the Greens would have to be disappointed. Massive reduction in their votes, and I understand that a lot of their volunteers have actually gone across to volunteer for David Pocock or volunteer for Jessie Price, and I wonder if they see those campaigns as their cousins as opposed to their rivals.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think that people outside the Labor Party don't understand. And I've always had this view that there are 2 teams in politics in Australia. There's Labor and there's everyone else. I mean, God, it was even in is it Dean Jench, the Adelaide Uni or Flinders Uni politics dude that wrote all the books for, if anyone did, 101 politics in first year uni, you got the Dean Jansch book. And in the opening chapter, it literally sets up that the foundation of our political system was Labor and non-Labor parties. And so all these non-Labor, it's almost like, you're either a Catholic, you're a Protestant, and there's thousands of Protestant churches, but there's only one true faith. And so these other sort of parties and members of parties can move around and feel quite at home at jumping across different parties. But in the Labor Party, you're either in the Labor Party or not in the Labor Party.
So that's the way that I've been reading these results as well, right? Which is, it just, are we talking kind of a 1930s Australia type of environment where, you've got the Labor Party, then this sort of collection of non-Labor parties that then work together to either be the government or the opposition. I also have the question, what does a parliament of 76 community independents look like? Because Jesse Price was explicitly running on a platform of being on the crossbench. Same thing with David Pocock, running on a campaign of explicitly being on the crossbench. But, of course, at some point you can't have everybody being on the crossbench. So those non-Labor parties, so like the Liberals and the Greens both seeing a bit of an alignment with the community independent was a really interesting situation here. And one thing for you to ask when you're talking with our comrades in WA is that I think that was the same situation in Fremantle, that there was a community independent up against a Labor candidate where the community independent then got preferences right across the non-Labor political spectrum to give a real challenge to Josh Wilson.
Look, and all parties, we've got all of our parties, we've all got our loyal bases, and we've seen that over the years, the Labor Party as well have had people who have drifted away from us and gone and joined other parties. And also in a voting sense as well, we've seen people who have been very loyal to the party have also moved away and voted for other parties in the elections. But I do think that we start from a bigger block because we've been around for 140 years. The Greens only came around 20 minutes ago. And I've always had this assumption that their bedrock is actually quite porous. And I think we're starting to see that. And I do think there's an existential crisis for the Greens in this very moment, because there are examples like David Pocock that prove that their dream, Max Chandler May the third's dream of a Greens government in 18 years is disappearing, quicker than you can say whatever, right? I think that what I'm interested in over the course of these episodes that we're doing across all these different states is how rooted is the Greens actually at a state-by-state level, because they are trying to paper over cracks right now in the media and draw attention away from some of the problems that are actually going on within their party. And it's been happening now for the last probably, 18 months, I reckon, or maybe even since. David Feeney's theory is since October 7, but maybe it even had sort of dug in before then, I'm not sure. But and it's something to sort of think about.
And the thing that people in head offices will be thinking about, so the difference between, your party infrastructure and then just your volunteers is, what does this mean for their public funding? What is the difference in amount? So I compared the Greens vote from, 2019 to 2025 and then applied sort of a $3 per vote funding value to it. And it's something like $100,000 just here in the ACT that they're missing out on. Yeah. Money that's going to David Pocock or Jesse Price in their first preferences.
Yeah. And there's a whole area of conversation we talk about there with David Pocock and funding after they're probably cracking the shits with the reforms that they've brought in. But anyway, that's for another podcast perhaps. Louise, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really do appreciate it. Best of luck with the business, and we'll have to get you back on the show next time we talk about ACT politics.
Anytime. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Good on you. All right, let's head to the other territory, the Northern Territory, and join us on the line from Darwin. I think he was travelling last time, but he's back home. Ryan Neve, good buddy of mine, long-time campaigner for the Labor Party. Mate, welcome back to Socially Democratic for our recap.
Thanks, Stephen, and fantastic result, and great to actually do this podcast in the land of the Larrakia for once, back in Darwin. So looking forward to it. Yeah,
absolutely. When we before I go to sort of the questions, I'll just give folks an overview of the party totals for the Northern Territory. Labor had a 0.2% swing against its primary vote, taking it down to 38 on the nose. The Coalition had a 4.5% swing to it on its primary vote, taking it up to 33.8. Don't know if there's any others that are worth noting. One Nation had a 2.5% swing to it. Trumpeter Patriots fell by 4.5 and now is registering as zero. I didn't run. I was going to say it's now registering 0 votes. What's going on there? Greens had a 3% swing against them. Others, nothing much to mention. Two-party preferred, 1.3% swing to the LNP. So the Coalition on 45.8 and Labor's on 54.2. Labor held both seats. We talked about both Solomon and Lingiari in the last episode. I kind of walked away from that conversation from you feeling like we were more worried about Lingiari, the bigger geographical seat, than the seat of Solomon, which covers off Darwin and Palmerston. But on the night, looked like Luke was going to lose Solomon there. So what happened?
Well, I think there was two very different campaigns were unfolding. I think Solomon had a cushy margin going into the election, and Lingiari was quite marginal. And I think for both completely different reasons, one's gone forwards and one's gone backwards. So I might as well just start at the top and talk about Solomon first. Essentially, Luke did have Luke Gosling, the candidate, did have a bit of a buffer for him there, but did suffer a 7.1% swing to him in the 2PP. I think, as I mentioned previously, I attribute that mainly to the popularity of the current territory government, the Country Liberals, who won power, less than a year ago. The Country Liberals did a big campaign based around the leader, Leah Finocchiaro. In fact, it got to the point that there was actually a bit of commentary in the media around, does anyone actually know what the Country Liberals' voice sounds like? Because all the ads featuring her actually had Leah speaking, not the candidate Lisa Bayliss. So they got a 10% swing to them on primaries, and that translated to 7% in the 2PP, but just didn't get her over the line on the night. I feel that the two things that sort of cushioned Luke against that turning into a loss was essentially, I think, the National Liberal campaign, as I think many of your contributors have noted over, was just terrible. So I think a lot of those swing and soft voters that maybe gave the Country Liberals a go in August at the territory level couldn't bring themselves to do it at a federal level 10 months later. And I also think that Luke did have a pretty strong ground game and that had local commitments that actually talked to people, whereas Lisa Bayliss's biggest commitment was, I will help work with the territory government about crime, not a federal issue. It just sort of cost them. I just don't think they did enough at the end. Like many Liberal candidates hadn't done the policy work, hadn't done the campaign work, and just fell short in the end. When you break it down a little further on a sort of booth by booth region, you see what's very interesting is a lot of the Darwin seats and booths are sort of up around that 55 to 60% 2PP, which is great news for the Territory Labor Party into the future. Palmerston did hover around that sort of 40 to 48% 2PP for ALP. So there, as I sort of explained, there are three sort of distinct universes. Two are now currently strong Labor for Luke, one strong for the CLP, but now Luke's got 3 years to hopefully deliver on his commitments, bring back the port into Australian hands, and then he should be fine next time round.
Did where were the swings recorded against Luke? Was it down in that Palmerston area?
The biggest swings were absolutely in that Palmerston area. Just having a look here, you've got booths like Bellamac, there was a 12% swing, Coolangatta 9%, Grey 15%. These are all sort of Palmerston suburbs that Territorians will be familiar with. That's not to say there were swings everywhere, but they were just smaller in the suburbs, in the Darwin suburbs, than they were in the Palmerston suburbs. So Luke's done a lot of work in Palmerston in previous election cycles, so I think he had a very good vote there. I think it just cost him with the demographics and the current situation of the CLP's leader being from there, and that popularity vote. So I think that's sort of gone off each other. Like cost of living, I thought should have bit a little harder in Palmerston, but obviously that just didn't resonate with Palmerston this time round, but it did in the Darwin suburbs and the Darwin city.
Interesting. Should we turn to Lingiari and get a sense of what happened here? Because this was the seat that we were a little bit worried about, but in the end we didn't need to. It was a great result.
It's a phenomenal result. I mean, I'll get into it into a minute, but I mean, I sort of said if the mobile bush polling team works, we've got nothing to worry about. And that's not only did that happen in spades, but there was also just some unprecedented results going on in these regional centres, which I sort of predicted would go strong. CLP did not. In fact, Marion Scrimgeour she didn't have a sophomore surge. She had a sophomore tsunami in some of those regional seats. It was just fantastic. Her decision to move to Alice Springs has obviously paid off. She won that Alice Springs on the days, something like 56-44, which is just unheard of. Like, I've never seen results like that for the Labor Party in Alice Springs. In fact, I tell a lie, it was 64.4% Labor to PP on the day, 55% in the pre-poll in the town of Alice Springs. That is just that's levels that Labor Party faithfuls, diehards have dreamt of for Alice Springs. We've only ever won an Alice Springs seat once in our entire history, and that was by the 2016 election when Adam Giles lost his seat as being one of the worst chief ministers ever, and we sort of won that on preferences by
Dale Wakefield.
Dale Wakefield, something like 18 votes or something. So that was our high watermark. And Marion has just come home with a wet sail. I think she's won every single booth in Alice Springs, which I've just never seen. I was just laughing when I was looking at those results. I've never seen anything like it. And you combine that with the mobile polling results, like there are just some insane numbers going on there. Like, we're talking in some mobile remote polling teams, a 2PP of like 91% Labor, wow. 92% Labor. Remote mobile team 27, which I'm reliably informed is the seat of Wadair, was cleaned up by the remote mobile team, the member for Daly, Durrani Young. That's his area, and his brother Birrigan. They have done a phenomenal job. Just to put in context, the Marion got 648 of the votes cast in the Wadair booth. In second place was Informal on 71. With the CLP coming a distant third on 38. That's what we're talking about.
Oh my God. The CLP lost to default.
So, and that is replicated across many, many mobile teams. I really, that's some joyous numbers but I really do think it represents a fairly significant issue, and that is one of, I just think, Aboriginal people in the Territory really did understand they were treated as a bit of a political football by the Liberal Party. This welcome to country nonsense. The Voice referendum, which was soundly rejected in those mobile, was voted for in the mobile teams in the Voice referendum, have just come in, and I think they've all just realised that it is Labor, not Liberals in the bush at the moment, and those results just speak for themselves. So it was great that that Aboriginal people found their voice out there again to just sort of give the Libs a bit of a kicking in that federal election there, because those results are just fantastic.
That's huge. I mean, I remember I was up on the 2016 campaign, and when Dale Wakefield did jag Alice Springs, I remember us in the campaign office on election night were high-fiving. We're like, can't believe it. We just won Alice Springs. But those numbers you're talking about are off the charts.
Absolutely. Like, beggars belief. Like, I had multiple people when I was writing those results to people going, that's a typo. What's the real result? I'm like, I swear to God, this is what's happening.
Yeah, love it. Be careful. The UN might send in some election observers to double check that that's all legit. But no, fantastic. Great job by Marion and the team. And look, Ryan, you talked about it in the episode leading up to Election Day. You said like this Lingiari is going to be won in these mobile booths. And do we have the people and the local community leaders to get out there and talk to folk and make sure that they exercise their democratic right and obviously vote Labor, and they did in spades, and it's just been a testament to good local community organising.
Oh, 100%. And just shout outs to our four Territory government members. So, Durrani Young, who I spoke about, Manny Brown in Arafura, which is the Tiwi Islands, and Maningrida he had some great results out there in his area. Selina Yubo, the leader of the opposition, out through the Arnhem Land, out to Groot Island, and Chancey Pake down in Central Australia. Like, they've just done a phenomenal job on that turnout. They're obviously bringing the next generation through, and they're obviously doing the right things out there. And in a combination of a very powerful and impressive woman in Marion Scrimgeour as the candidate, it's just given us some tremendous results. Tremendous results out there.
Love it. So I'm interested, actually, just before we close out, in terms of what this means. I know the Territory elections aren't for a while away, but I'm sort of seeing two stories here, because clearly the leader, the Territory Chief Minister, and I'm not going to say a surname because I'm going to completely just destroy it, and it's a beautiful Italian surname, but anyway, is clearly popular in Darwin. And the results speak for itself in the booths coming out of Solomon. But at the same time, I mean, those results in Alice Springs are amazing. So what do we take from this? Like, what are the key lessons, both positive and ones that we need to be cautious about heading into the territory elections in a couple of years' time?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably one last thing that's Jacinta Price effect, I think, was big. I think Peter Dutton went hard on Alice Springs and backing in Jacinta in making it a bit of a focal point for the failures of Albanese, and it didn't work. I think the people of Alice Springs rejected that sort of premise. I think Jacinta's been roundly found out she's not as popular as she thinks she is, be it in the Territory, Alice Springs, the Liberal or National Party rooms. So I think the key here is that the CLP just have to reflect on which way they want to go. They've put all their chips on law and order. All their policies are about that, so that Leah is getting rewarded for doing what she said she's going to do. But if you read between the lines, and policy wonks will pick this up very, very quickly, there is a lot of law and order stuff on the punishment of crime. There is no money or policies towards the prevention of crime. And I think what's happening in Alice Springs specifically is that Alice Springs is a lot further along in the law and order journey than Darwin and Palmerston are. They've gone through it. They've lived it for a lot longer. They know what works. They know what doesn't work. And I think there has been a bit of, what are you actually going to do with the CLP? And I think that's come out. Like, I mean, there was I think a couple of months ago, Leah flew down Alice Springs and was sort of accosted by the local action crime group saying, you haven't done anything. So that's already starting to turn the honeymoon in Alice Springs. I think if Leah and the CLP will probably just need to start moving into the prevention of crime space, because they can't. The answer is just not locking everyone up. It's a disastrous sort of stat that over 1% of our population is in prison, and the fact that is a vast majority of young Aboriginal men is just going to breed bigger and worse problems going forward if you don't actually get into the rehabilitation and the prevention of crime. We all know what the actual answers are. It just takes that investment of the right programs and the right time. Unfortunately, sometimes the rhetoric is all around punishment, and that attracts votes. But if you actually want to solve the problem, you and I both know that there's much better policies out there. So hopefully they will learn that lesson and start putting those policies there, because we all love the Territory and we want to live in a great Territory and we just want the policies that work. So my tip to Leah would be, if she's concentrating on the prevention of crime as well as gets the economy working, then she'll be in a box seat. The Labor Party just needs to figure out how do they get back into the Darwin and Palmerston conversation, given that the challenge is they've got 4 remote members who don't live in Darwin, they live in bush communities. So how do you present a narrative that you're a government for all when you are clearly sort of outside of Darwin? So I think that's just smart pre-selections and smart tactical moves that can easily present itself after a redistribution. So, like they say in a first government, you just have to sit back and wait for them to make their own mistakes when you're in opposition in the first term. Let's just see where that heads and see where that things. But right now, there'd be some nervous CLP backbenchers in the northern suburbs, but I still think they probably feel pretty comfortable overall right now.
Well, we shall wait and see. And I've said this many times on this podcast, certainly whenever we've been talking about the Northern Territory. Anyone listening to this particular episode that is a campaigner, if you have never campaigned on a Northern Territory campaign, you need to do it. Like, if you've got a bucket list of campaigns to do, not just here in Australia but around the world, you need to go do a Northern Territory campaign. It is an incredibly special experience. And don't just hang out in Darwin either. Get out into the communities as well. Some great, wonderful moments that the Labor Party can present you as a campaigner, and the Northern Territory campaign is one of those moments. Ryan, thank you so much for your contribution, not just in today's episode, but obviously in our lead up as well. I don't know if you end up knowing, but that episode went for 3 hours and 45 minutes. And there's a place in heaven for all those citizens that listen to all 3 hours and 45 minutes. They're a special. I'm going to get like an honour board at in the Socially Democratic Clubhouse for those people that listen to every single minute of that monster marathon pre-election Path to 76 episode.
I did listen to all of it, but on double speed. Let's just say there's a couple of us who might need to take a bit more longer breaths, but other than that, I got through it. I thought I loved it.
Dangerous doing it double speed when I speak because I talk quick enough as it is. So anyway, good on you. Well,
I know you're long enough, Donnelly. I know you're long enough to listen. I know what you're saying.
Fair play. All right, mate. Take it easy, and I'm sure we'll talk to you pretty soon.
Thanks, Stephen. Cheers, mate. See you.
Bye. Okay, let's head west to this state that's called Western Australia. Some of us on the East Coast may have forgotten about it, but it is still a part of the Federation.
We do your entire economy. It's okay, Stephen.
Well, yeah, you're getting a couple of tax credits from us Victorians. But that voice, the dulcet tones you heard there was, I think, someone who cleaned up on election day. She was the only person who was prepared to say on our path to 76 elections that she was actually gambling. As opposed to the rest of them who were and didn't admit it on the show. She's a former chief of staff in the WA government and a senior advisor in the Victorian government and campaign staff on various federal and state campaigns. And she's now a partner at GRA Partners based in Perth. Priya Brown, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Thanks for having me back. And yes, I had a good night for many reasons, one being my bank account and the other being a very, very big result for the Labor Party. So it was great.
It was huge. And we didn't even need to rely on Western Australia. I remember like maybe 6 months ago, like, WA, man,
yep.
you got to hold all those seats, man.
We're back to irrelevance. It's fine. It was, obviously coming off a high watermark here, but still pretty exciting for us to be able to pick up another seat. Really, we picked up another Senate spot as well. So plus a new seat. So 3 new spots for us, which is pretty exciting.
Beautiful. Love it. This has been such a fun series of episodes. I've been doing the post-election analysis as I whip around the country and get to talk to people like you about, this is what's happening now in our state. We've got this and that and rivers of gold and all those kind of things. Let's look at the state totals for WA, starting with the primaries. Remembering the sort of 90% of the vote still is counted. We're taping this one on the 21st of May. There was 1.3% swing against Labor on the primary. I'm laughing only because I made a joke in our election night recap that with the swing against Labor on their primary, the Premier of Western Australia, his leadership must be in question now, surely, based on the Jacinta Allen theory.
Of course.
The Libs, however, had a 3.3% swing against them on their primary. There was a 3.7% swing to the One Nation on their primary. I think that's one of the few ones that I've seen so far of that size. That means that there was a 0.6% swing to Labor on our two-party preferred, taking our two-party preferred up to 55.6 as it stands right now. A glorious result for Labor in the West. Your thoughts, reflections and broader overviews of what happened in Western Australia on election night?
Yeah, I mean, amazing result. And congratulations to kind of Ellie Whittaker and Lauren Cahoon and the team here. I think they worked really well with, the guys over in NATSEC, Paul and Jen. We ran a different campaign again here that kind of coincided and kind of complemented the national campaign, which always helps. We were coming off a pretty high watermark, it's safe to say. But I think that the federal Labor brand also held its own. I think we spoke last time about whether or not it's just the state Labor brand keeping things buoyant, but I don't think that's the case. Great result. And the Libs are just decimated here. Having such a bad state result and such a bad federal result, it's going to be a very difficult recovery for them. And this was once their blue ribbon state. So, it's got pretty big ramifications, I think, moving forward.
It's you're right. It was once their blue ribbon state. And I think it's a reminder to all of us, really, a sobering reminder to all of us that things can turn pretty quickly without you really knowing it,
Yeah.
And you can be in the wilderness all of a sudden.
And I reflect on 2013 here. We had a horrific primary coming out of the Rudd-Gillard years. We only held one Senate spot. We lost Louise Pratt at that time. And as a kind of young Labor kid door knocking, it was very disheartening. So things can turn very, very quickly. So we shouldn't forget that as we go into our giant majority government moving forward. Yeah.
What are you hearing internally from the Libs about how they're feeling about this?
I mean, I think that they are I think there's a level of shock still, definitely. And it's interesting, you've got someone like Basil Zempilas, who's now the opposition leader in the state parliament here. The Libs managed to regain opposition status finally. And he's actually coming out and starting to talk about should we have quotas for women and, what do our branch structures look like? And so I think that there is a little bit of reflection going on, but I think they're still just in a complete state of shock. And like I said, their rebuild is going to be very, very difficult from here.
It's also interesting to note that obviously, as I said before, recording this on a Wednesday. Yesterday was the announcement of the coalition breaking up. Inject that in my veins. This is fantastic.
I am shocked. I think I anticipated the Liberals would want to do that. I can appreciate why they would want to, but it makes no sense for the Nationals to do that. I mean, they lose opposition status, they lose staff, they lose salaries. They're now going to be up against each other in seats. They've had a dummy spit over a few bits of policy and backed themselves into complete irrelevance. We don't even need them in the Senate now. Labor can get things passed just with the Liberal Party. So it's delicious, but it's a bit ridiculous, to be honest.
It reminds me of that episode in Seinfeld when George is breaking up with his girlfriend and she says to him, "You're breaking up with me?"
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly how I feel about it. And a journo mate had said to me that, she'd heard last week that the Nats were looking to do this, and I kind of didn't believe her. I was like, why would they do that? I'm still confused.
Who knew that the Nats had hand in that relationship? But there you go. I want to start with Bullwinkel because, you called it in the show. You said, hey, if we're winning Bullwinkel, then we are cleaning up. And sure enough, we won Bullwinkel and we also cleaned up.
Yes.
What do you make of what happened there?
Yeah, and I, since we were being honest with betting, I was anticipating the Liberals to win. I actually had a bet on the Libs in this seat because I really did think we would win on primaries, which we did, and then the Nats would tip the Libs over the line. And they didn't quite get there because our primary was big enough. I think we spoke last time about that notional 3.3 and whether or not that actually means anything. I think the Nats actually underperformed from where I thought they would. It's a 13% rural seat, and I actually thought she underperformed. But at the same time, I think even she on the booths was, from my understanding from the Liberal candidate, telling people not necessarily encouraging them to preference the Liberals. And I think there was a bit of discontent between the two parties there, which I think really helped us. But I think we just ran a really strong campaign there, a good local candidate, and a huge result for us to pick that up. Like I said, we're winning that. We're having a very, very big night, and it was a very, very big night. So, but it was close. It only got called a couple of days ago, about 4 days ago. So, yeah,
I mean, looking at the primary votes, and I think we talked about this for Trish Cook and Labor to be in the hunt. We were sort of putting like a 32, 33% primary in order to stay in the race.
It's a big ask.
Yeah, and this is weird because they're doing swings for and against, but I just don't think it's fair. This is what the ABC is. I just don't think it's fair to do that based on a creation of a new seat. I know they're doing old boundaries and stuff, but I'm not going to read out the swings because I just don't.
I agree with you.
They're relevant. But anyway, so Labor did get to 32 on the nose.
Yeah.
The Libs were on 24.3 and the Nationals were on 15.8.
Yeah.
Do you think the Nationals would have felt like they were a little bit undercooked there? Like if you're heading up the campaign team there, you'd be going, I just thought we'd get more than that.
I mean, you've got someone who was the opposition leader that chose to move to a federal seat. I think you'd be hoping to get more than 15%. I think, she needed to come second and she didn't. And
substantially so, like almost by 10 points.
Yeah. So, I think that would have been pretty disappointed. I mean, the Nationals nationally had an okay night. They didn't have an atrocious night. But, I think that they would have been disappointed, especially with a star candidate like Mayor.
Yeah, well, suck it. All right, let's go to Pearce, which is a place dear to my heart. I spent a whole day there on a booth in the last WA election. I feel like I know all the locals personally.
Yes.
I've never met Never met so many people from Liverpool in my entire life.
Yeah.
What's your take on how we went in Pearce?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this last time, even though it had a high margin, that it was worth discussing because there were some significant state swings, and because it is, nationally one of the highest mortgage stress households in the country. So 50% of households holding mortgages. So there are a couple of pressure points there. I think actually only getting a kind of, what was it, 2.2?
Yeah, 2.3 swing against us on primary.
I think that's pretty minimal, considering how big some of those statewide swings are, considering Tracy was unwell and unable to do as much campaigning, and considering we were coming off an election where Christian Porter was the candidate, and so Labor probably got a little bit of a boost from that. I think 2.3 is really reasonable. I think it shows a strong Labor brand there once again, and that the candidate's well liked. So, a good result, really. And that was, where did her vote go? I went 1.6 also swing against the Libs. So it didn't go to them, went to Cannabis and One Nation.
Yeah, and substantially, like almost 11 points collectively between One Nation and Cannabis. So 4.6% swing to One Nation and 6.9% swing to legalise cannabis. So clearly, I guess there was a bunch of folks up there that really weren't overly keen on the two majors.
Yeah,
went elsewhere, and then that resulted in a 2.5% swing to the Libs on the two-party preferred. But, I mean, who cares? We won the seat, right?
Exactly. We held it by, 8.8%, and now it's a 56.4% seat. So, But, to be honest, I probably anticipated a little bit more of a swing, but I also wasn't anticipating how large the swing towards Labor would be nationally. So, I think that's a really, really great result for the party there.
I love the name of the legalised cannabis candidate, Ramon Granados Rangel.
I wasn't going to try and attempt that, so well
that's
done.
Fantastic.
Not too badly.
I think he'd get my second preference.
Just for the name,
yeah. Ramon Granados. I like how he's put his second name in there. That's brilliant.
I think the legalised cannabis party as well. Having had a swing voter sister who used to just be like, "Oh, the sex party, that sounds fun. I'll vote for them." I think the legalised cannabis party probably get a bit of that. That's a fun party to vote for. We'll go there, vote. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're a dope smoker or if you're not getting enough sex, they were your two parties that you wanted to live vicariously through your vote.
Indeed.
Just like how if you're a bit of a prick and you want to be more virtuous, that's why people voted for the Greens for such a long time. They could feel like they were a better person just by voting for them.
Indeed.
There's a whole other conversation anyway. You as an ex-Victorian is the Fiona Patten, how she completely fucked the pooch with the whole changing the sex party to the reason party, and now she's not in any party, and now she's not in Parliament. Like you had a winning formula. Why did you alter it? Because you thought you were bigger than the idea.
You thought you were special, and we will get to this, I think, when we talk to Canning. Everyone thinks they're special. Very few people are.
Yep. Let's do that. Let's go to Canning now, and then we'll do Tangney.
Yeah.
So Canning, we talked about this one. You were like, this could be interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting for a different reason. I think we spoke at the time about how he was really heavily moving away from the Liberal brand, and I thought that was a little bit silly, to be honest, because I think because people aren't special a lot of the time, and you still have a base. Both the major parties will always have a base, and I feel like he could have eroded that base, and he was on such a slim margin that why would he do that to himself? Turns out he was right. He won by a lot. He was I think he was the only to increase his margin. He increased by 5.33%, so quite big, and he increased his margin at almost every booth. So a big result for Hastie. I think the deliberate separation away from the Liberal brand worked very well. People voted for him, not the Liberal Party. I also think that's quite consistent with the seat, though. The previous MP, Don Randall, long-time MP there, he worked the seat very hard, and he famously used to drive around on Sundays and offer to mow people's lawns. So he was kind of very local and known, and, he had a big personal brand. So, it's worked out quite well for Hastie, but I'm still surprised he managed to buck the trend to the extent he did. Hard worker, hats off to him. And I think there's probably a few people in the WA branch that are a little relieved in the sense of there's always the competition about where you put your money. And I think there were a few people trying to encourage them to put more money into Canning, and they were saying, well, we need to focus on seats over here. And with that kind of a swing, no, I don't think any additional money in the last final few weeks into that seat would have made a difference.
I also think that just seeing Hastie in all the national media that he has done, he does look like a contrast to Dutton. He actually gives off vibes of a decent sounding human being, really, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's quite socially conservative, but he's moderate in so many other ways, and he is personable, and he looks like a leader. Physically, he looks like a leader, as well as his presence. And, I think people are attracted to that in their leaders, that kind of, that presence he has. I think it's quite calming to a lot of people, considering he's in the SAS, probably not that calming, but he's a hard worker. And obviously what I liked about him in particular, some of the interviews he's done, talking about his leadership ambitions, and he hasn't pretended that he doesn't have them. He's like, yes, I would like to be a leader one day. I absolutely have leadership ambitions. But right now it's not the right time, and I have a young family and blah, blah. And I kind of like that honesty, and it didn't actually come across as arrogant. And I think that clearly came out in the campaign.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. 100% agree with you on that one. There's nothing that annoys me more, and even not even leadership of a party, but even just political ambitions. I kind of love asking people who clearly want to run for a seat in Parliament one day, going, do you have that? And they go, no, I'm not interested in it. You're a fucking liar.
Yeah.
You totally want to do that. Why did you move to that town? You never wanted to live in that town. You're only there because you want to run for the seat. I'm not an idiot.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's unnecessary, and it feels disingenuous, and people don't like that. I don't mind ambition. I would like to be led by someone that would like to lead.
Yeah, I will go on the record right now and say, if you see me move out of where I live right now to somewhere else,
you're running for a seat?
I'm running for a seat, okay? So, and I'm not leaving where I live. All right, Tangney. I love this result because we all love Sam Lim, and he just jagged it the last one. And now I feel like Sam Lim is the sitting member of what I would say is reasonably safe Labor terrain.
57%. Wild. Big swing towards him. We once again spoke last time about demographics not being destiny, as to pinch your line, which, by the way, I've now used a few times over the last couple of weeks. Thank you, Stephen.
Go for it.
And it's true, and I think a seat like that is a perfect example. That is a Liberal seat. People would say that is a Liberal seat. I would have said that 4 years ago. That is naturally swinging back, but he's worked that seat over 4 years. The Labor brand is high. They have worked those issues. We spoke to the electorate in the right way, and he deserves the win. So very, very exciting for the party, and I think I agree with you. I think that's a Labor seat now for a little while longer, I think.
4.5% swing to us on primary, 5.5% swing against the Libs. Like everyone else swung against or held pat. He had a swing to him.
Yeah.
You cannot make another argument other than people saw him and went, yes, like that guy, going to vote for him. And then
we spoke last time about that his name came up in focus groups. But that's, and once again, going to the when someone's special or not, like there's a few percent in that, but I think it's just he spoke to the demographic well, and that's not just because he's from a multicultural background, but but I do think that's a component of it, sure, because he understood how to then speak to the multicultural communities, of which there is huge high voting percentage of Chinese, Malay and Singaporean there. And he just worked hard. He just worked hard. He had the support of, a big state Labor team in those electorates as well. Deserves the win.
I also we were talking to Todd Pinkerton when we did New South Wales. We haven't done Victoria yet, but the subtext to this campaign, the national campaign, I think has been a misreading by the coalition, may it rest in peace, of their how important the 1.4 million Chinese Australian or Chinese Australians of Chinese descent voting population has in the electorate, and particularly in condensed areas like Melbourne's eastern suburbs, like places like Bennelong. And I'm assuming you should throw in Tangney into this as well.
I would, yes, yeah. In terms of out of the WA seats, I would, yeah. I think that comes. I think China as an issue, as a geopolitical issue. I also think it comes down to, once again, diversity of candidates. Women and diversity from a nationality point of view. People want to feel represented by people that look like them and sound like them and understand them. And the Liberals just have failed at that miserably.
Yeah.
Looking at the new Labor caucus, it is such a great, diverse group of individuals that will be able to represent what modern Australia looks like now.
Yeah, I mean it's something that the media don't talk about, right? Because that's not a good story, but it is a good story that has come out of this campaign. And I think it's been hard work, though, right? It's not easy.
No, and I think we saw that. I remember the conversations in 2018 Victorian state election around that the Libs ran really hard on this anti-Belt and Road. That was called, I think, China kind of campaign, and that did not end well for them. And yeah, I don't know why they haven't worked that out yet.
No, I know. Clearly there was elements within their campaign that was trying to do that, because they had selected, the candidate that ran in Tangney, Howard Ong, is obviously of Chinese or Asian descent. They ran a Chinese Australian in Bennelong. There had been reports out of the Liberal CHQ of them trying to reach out and repair the damage that Morrison had done. But that got all completely undone by old mate Dutton in the debate, saying China is our number one adversary. Yeah. And then Buggerlugs double downing on morning radio or whatever it was. It's like going, what, you guys are broken.
And that just also speaks to the ill discipline. I mean, I like to say I put this election result down to there's three elements, right? I think that the Labor Party ran a near perfect campaign. There's very little I could fault. The Liberals ran an atrocious campaign. Their level of discipline was just so bad. Everything went wrong that could go wrong for them. And that's a win and a loss, but the scale of the win is the systemic and cultural problems in the Liberal Party. They have a lot of work to do.
They really do. It's going to be a tough road back, and I hope it's bitter and there's a lot of recrimination and backstabbing. Let's go to, I don't know if we're burying the lead here, because this is maybe the story of the night out of WA, but more. I want more. So,
we mentioned this for about 30 seconds during our session last time, Stephen, just that it was a 4-horse race and so anything could happen. And anything did happen. The Labor Party has picked up the seat of Moore with just a 0.6% swing. The Libs had a 10% swing against them. That all went to Ian Goodenough, who was the sitting member. Two other independents there. This was not a seat that it was on the broader target seat list, but it was not a target A seat. This did not get the kind of attention and funding and people that a Tangney or Pearce, etc., a Bullwinkel did. So, phenomenal result. I don't think I have any other analysis of why this happened other than I think just the circumstances of this election around those four candidates and that Labor brand sitting sky high still.
I am interested in the former the Ian Goodenough running as an independent picked up 10% of the vote. Where his preferences went, the Greens got 11% of the vote. We got 32%. So clearly, we'd probably get 80-85% of those Green preferences, and then clearly there was a bit of a spray.
He ran an open ticket.
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
God, that would have pissed off the Libs.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the Libs pissed him off by disendorsing him. So, that seat's previously been held by a Liberal member who defected and became an independent as well. So,
they've got form.
Yeah, they've got form in the electorate. But Vince Connolly, really well known, the Liberal candidate, he was the previous state member over there. He'd be pretty disappointed, I'd say, which I'm pretty happy about. So.
How bitter would you have to be, though? Like, just say, You've been a member of the Labor Party for a long, long time. I'm sure there have been plenty of moments in your journey as a Labor Party activist where the party's pissed you off, right?
Yeah, a few times.
But you're never gonna take joy out of seeing the Labor Party lose. And I just wonder how Ian Goodenough felt on election night seeing the Labor Party get up in Maud. I mean, was his intentions to just to say to the Liberal Party, "Hey, don't do that. That's really annoying," but not wanting to?
No. It's ego. I'm not going to pretend I understand Ian Goodenough's mind because he is an interesting individual. But I would not. It wasn't a slap on the wrist, the Libs. It was, no, I deserve this. This is my seat. I'm going to run it.
Yeah.
I think it was all ego. So I think actually he would be okay with it. To be honest, I think that's how pissed off he was. I mean, you don't run an open ticket if you kind of don't want the Libs to win after you, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Bitter. Okay, last seat I want to talk to you about is Freo, and I wasn't going to talk to you about Freo until I had the our interview with Louise Crossman when we did the ACT, because she did raise Freo as a sort of a twin seat to Bean in the ACT, where Labor had an independent run against it, and obviously came down to a close count.
Yeah,
but we prevailed in the end. Josh Wilson is Labor's incumbent there, and he had an independent running against him in Kate Hullett.
Yes.
Who came second in the count.
Yes.
What happened, and should we be worried for the future?
So Kate ran in the state campaign only 2 months prior and came pretty close to beating Simone McGurk, who's the minister here in the state government. To be honest, I certainly didn't anticipate this result. Fremantle's an interesting seat. People think about Fremantle, they think about it being quite a greensy, left, hippie-ish, I would say like the Bob Brown Greens originally seat. Obviously, demographics change. There is a lot of wealthy individuals now, more that kind of teal leaning green in that Freo centre. But as you go out, it's quite a big electorate, and you've got real classic Labor suburban seats surrounding it. And I thought that would kind of protect him from that kind of teal incumbency, not to mention teal insurgent, not to mention Josh is, rightly or wrongly, does speak out on a lot of these left issues outside of the caucus. He spoke out against AUKUS. He spoke out against some of the climate change policy. He is quite outspoken. And so I thought maybe it would be a little bit different than a Simone McGurk who's bound by cabinet solidarity, for example. I think he got a 5% swing against him, so it's not like that's a huge result considering how big his margin was, but it's just the independent got 23% of the vote. So, 6% swing against the Greens, 5% swing against the Liberal Party. The other previous independents votes went to Kate. So I think we should be worried in the sense of the Teals now don't have Liberal seats to run in, so they will start running in Labor seats.
Yeah.
I think we are better at that than the Liberals because we speak to those issues better, and also because we have had the Greens for so long, and we are finally starting to work out how to actually combat their messaging and play in those seats where I think we've struggled in the past. So, we see that in obviously the Queensland results and in Melbourne, which let's all be very joyful about that. Probably my biggest happiness of the night. I think we should be worried, but I think Josh is one of my favourite local members. I think he works really, really hard, and I think he'll recover and he'll be fine.
Josh may agree with those issues that he's speaking out on. I'm wondering I'm curious to know if he's speaking out on them because he thinks that that's where the electorate is. I think, so he's trying to almost out left wing his potential opponents. And my follow up question that we might want to make here is it? I think one of the lessons that we may have learned from certainly Melbourne, Wills and McNamara was those candidates chose not to do that. They chose to be traditional centre-left, centrist candidates and stood by both the party's position and also what they believe in, and had swings or they held on. Well, Peter Khalil obviously had a swing against him, but he hung on. Josh had a swing to him in Macnamara.
Big result, yeah.
And we won. No, we didn't even resource Melbourne, and we won by Sarah Whitty just being herself, not being a Sophie Ishmael and trying to be super, super hard left wing. She was just on the Labor Party, man. And she won. And I'm just wondering, just maybe Josh just needs to be the Labor Party instead of trying to be something that
I agree to an extent. I think they are his views, first and foremost. I don't think he is pretending to be something he's not. I think they are his views. And I think that goes back to the Fremantle, I think, does respond to that. And maybe he was then, however, not protected by the suburban seats that didn't want him to be talking to those issues. The suburban part of the seat that wanted him to maybe be more classic Labor, centrist left. So, and that's for him to think through and analyse. But I would agree with you to a strong extent. Like I think there's still a little piece that they're his views and fine, but you got to look at your electorate as a whole. Yeah. You can't outgrain the Greens, and people don't necessarily want you to.
No. And as we're learning, the Greens are on the nose right now. Like this is sort of something that's kind of we've seen in the offing since the Queensland election last year, and then with the Prahran by-election here in Victoria and Melbourne City Council election, they went backwards. Excellent campaign run by no joking. But there's been enough evidence to sort of suggest, I think there's some shifting sands here for the Greens, and now I actually think they're in a existential crisis.
Yeah, and I think they saw that coming to an extent. I think that the reason they changed their tact on the housing policy in the Senate, for example, after being so adversarial on that, was they go, okay, people actually not responding to our approach. And so I think that you saw a change in the last 6 months, but I think it came too late. And it's a very different Greens in WA than the Greens in Victoria. I will not, I don't think, ever campaign in a Victorian Labor versus Green seat again. It's disgusting. Like I mentally can't handle it. Like the footage of some of your pre-polls over there were pretty just full on, and we don't have that kind of culture here, which is lovely.
Yeah. It is truly trench warfare. You feel like you're back in NUS. That's what it feels like.
It absolutely feels like student politics. It really does, and it's disgusting.
Yeah, and it makes me, and it brings out the worst in me as well. I channel 1997 Stephen Donnelly, and you don't want to see that. You don't want to see that
on any given day, Stephen. Yeah.
Anyway, start yelling at them in Latin. All right. Anything else on WA other than just what a result?
No, I think, the only other kind of seat we touched on was Curtin. Obviously, that was our one kind of teal Lib seat. It was the seat that I didn't put money on because I actually was like, I don't know how this is going to go. I thought it would be much closer than it was. The teal ran away with it. And I think that goes to candidate selection. I think it goes to the Liberal brand generally. He was too conservative candidate for that seat. Yes, he worked hard, but I don't think it mattered in the end. I thought she'd be the first teal to go, lowest primary in the country out of any of the teals, and she has flip-flopped on a few things, but that Liberal brand just trashed.
Yeah, well. So,
great result. Big Labor caucus. Like I said, we picked up a Senate spot, so two new Labor senators going in and one that was remaining already ruined. So, big result. And I was very happy to see West Australia rewarded in the cabinet with an extra spot, rightly so, still under quota, but that's fine. I'm not going to speak to Victorians about that because I know you're feeling the same. But, good to see some additional representation because as much as we all weren't hanging on at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, waiting on those WA booths to come in, I think we still need WA, and I like to think we're still very, very relevant, Stephen.
It must have been a fun night though anyway, watching from seeing the future basically ahead of you. Like you must have, is there some sort of sense of anticipation going, it's like getting your mum and dad are letting you open one or two Christmas presents after midnight mass, and they're pretty good. They're bangers, right? Yeah, and then you wake up the next morning thinking, what else is coming? And it's like this, like you're seeing what's happening in the East Coast going, oh my God.
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, last election campaign, as you know, my husband was the state secretary of the WA party, and I had a 4-month-old baby, and he had been working 100-hour weeks, doing a phenomenal job. And, I'd been hormonal, and I don't get emotional on election night, but I was stressed because I knew we needed WA to come in. It's the first time I've cried on election night. And he messaged me and he said, it's big. And I said, which way? And he said, good big. And I just burst out crying. My mum actually said to me, you need to get your shit together. I was like, okay. She did not swear. Well, this time round, it was kind of actually almost the opposite in the sense of I was like, well, now I'm worried if we underperform. It's an embarrassment thing for us. But one, we certainly did not underperform. We probably had the least big swings out of any of the in the country, but that was because we were coming off such a high water mark and they picked up seats and they ran a great campaign. So I'm really proud of the group here. And I was nervous, but it was a very fun night. I was lucky enough to be at Senator Varun Ghosh's house, and he was re-elected. That was his kind of election Senate round this time, and there was a lot of champagne and a lot of celebrating, and especially looking at, in particular, the result coming into Melbourne.
Well, Priya, thank you so much for your contribution to the podcast over the last couple of weeks. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad you cleaned up financially as well in the bookie market. Yeah,
no, Dixon and Sturt really came through for me. So
wonderful. Hey, Social Democrats, thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And a massive thanks to our newest paid members of our Socially Democratic Patreon community, including Yorick Piper, Finbar Bray, Angela Inglis, Mr. Champion, Roger Sidome, Danielle Evans, Trav Dowling, and someone who goes by the name of Quantum. I think you might be a Bond fan, so I will just call you Q. If we've missed out your name, that was not intentional, so please send us a message on Patreon and we'll sort it out next time and shout you out. Thank you to those people for joining our Patreon community. We really, really appreciate it. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.